The knock on my front door came just as the sun was beginning to disappear behind the hills of Maple Creek, Montana. I almost ignored it. I had spent 5 years learning how to live with silence after my marriage ended, and I wasn't expecting anyone. But when I opened the door, my heart stopped. Standing there was my ex-wife, Rachel. She looked older, exhausted, and far more fragile than I remembered. Beside her stood a little girl clutching a small drawing of a bluebird with both hands. The child looked up at me with uncertain eyes, and before I could even understand why they were there, my carefully rebuilt life began to crumble all over again. Before we continue, if you believe in kindness, hope, forgiveness, compassion, and second chances, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs encouragement, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps more heartfelt stories reach people who may need a little hope today. 5 years earlier, Rachel had walked away from our marriage after months of endless arguments, disappointment, and dreams that simply refused to survive reality. I had blamed myself for losing the woman I loved. I buried myself in woodworking, turning an old barn into a small furniture shop, where every table and rocking chair became another attempt to repair the broken pieces inside me. The town knew me as the quiet craftsman, who always smiled politely but never talked about his past. I believed some doors were never meant to open again. Rachel stood in front of me without the confidence she once carried. Time had softened the sharp edges between us. The little girl stayed close to her side, nervously squeezing the drawing. Rachel explained that the child's name was Grace. She wasn't my daughter, and Rachel made that clear almost immediately. Grace had entered her life through heartbreaking circumstances after the passing of a close relative. Overnight, Rachel had become the only family the little girl had left. She had done everything possible to provide for her, but life had become harder than she ever imagined. Medical bills from caring for her late relative had emptied her savings. She had lost her apartment and was preparing to move across the country with nowhere stable to begin again. She wasn't asking me for money. She wasn't asking to come back into my life. She had come because she remembered something I once told her, long before everything fell apart. I had said that no child should ever feel unwanted if I could help it. Those words had stayed with her longer than our marriage itself. She wondered if I could build a small wooden bed for Grace before they left town. She couldn't afford one, but she wanted the little girl to have something that truly belonged to her. At first, old wounds made every moment uncomfortable. I wanted to protect myself from reopening scars that had taken years to heal. Yet every time Grace quietly admired the birdhouses hanging inside my workshop or smiled at the smell of fresh cedar, my bitterness became harder to hold on to. She never complained. She never asked for toys. She simply watched me work with wide, curious eyes, fascinated by how rough pieces of wood slowly became something beautiful. Over the next several days, I built more than a bed. I carved tiny bluebirds into the headboard because Grace loved birds. I made matching shelves for her books and a small wooden chest where she could keep treasures she collected during new adventures. Rachel spent those afternoons helping me sand the wood, and for the first time in years, we talked honestly instead of defensively. There was no blame left between us, only regret for the things we had never understood while we were together. We couldn't change our past, but we could choose not to carry anger into the future. On the morning they were supposed to leave, Grace wandered into my workshop carrying another drawing. This one showed 3 people planting a tiny tree beneath a bright blue sky. She shyly handed it to me before running back outside. The picture wasn't perfect, but the meaning was impossible to miss. Sometimes family isn't defined by the past. Sometimes it begins with one act of kindness. As Rachel loaded the last box into her aging car, a neighbor arrived unexpectedly. Word had spread through our small town about what Rachel was facing. One neighbor offered temporary housing. Another offered a teaching position at the local elementary school. A retired mechanic volunteered to repair her unreliable car. My church community organized furniture, groceries, and school supplies before sunset. None of us had planned it. Compassion simply spread from one person to another until hope became stronger than hardship. Rachel no longer needed to leave Montana. Grace started school just weeks later, proudly sleeping in the handcrafted bed that reminded her every night that she belonged somewhere. I continued building furniture, But now I also taught free woodworking classes to local children on Saturday mornings. Grace became my most enthusiastic helper, always insisting every birdhouse deserved a tiny bluebird painted somewhere inside, where only the builder would know it existed. It became our little tradition, a reminder that unseen kindness often changes lives the most. If this story has touched your heart so far, please take a moment to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who still believes that compassion can change the world. Stories like these continue because of viewers like you. Before this story comes to an end, I'd love to hear from you. Please leave a comment telling us about a time when someone gave you a second chance, or when you chose to give one to someone else. Your story might become the encouragement another person desperately needs today. I never imagined my ex-wife would return to my doorstep carrying a little girl and a simple request for help. I certainly never expected that a small wooden bed would rebuild something far greater than furniture. It rebuilt trust, restored friendships, healed old regrets, and reminded an entire community that broken relationships don't always have to end in bitterness. Sometimes they become the foundation for a different kind of family. And sometimes, the greatest miracles don't arrive with applause or celebration. They quietly knock on your front door, holding a child's drawing, waiting for someone willing to open it.